Thank you, Chairman Heath, for inviting our office to this committee meeting and for the opportunity to address the committee. My name is Ryan Germany. I'm the General Counsel for the Secretary of State's office. I've been in that position since 2014. I've had the privilege to serve three secretaries, Secretary Kemp, Secretary Crittenden, and Secretary Raffensperger, and it's been a privilege to serve. Today, what I thought I would do, Mr. Chairman, if it is all right with you, is just make a few opening remarks to try to address some of the consistent questions, and then we're of course happy to take your questions. And I think, as you suggested, we have three people here. We might have to kind of figure out how to best divvy up those questions when that time comes. A few things I want to address to make sure I address before opening up for questions are some of the frequently asked questions we've received regarding the 2020 election, including questions about signature verification, absentee ballot drop boxes, and then what I think we should be looking at in terms of moving forward to further strengthen Georgia's election processes. And then, of course, we're happy to take any questions. Georgia has some of the strongest laws in the country to ensure secure elections. We don't allow ballot harvesting. We do citizenship check during voter registration. Absentee ballots have to be requested through signature verified applications or through a secure online portal that requires a Georgia photo ID to match what's on file with the voter registration office. Signatures are then checked again on absentee ballots when they're returned, so we in essence have a double signature match requirement. Absentee ballots have to be returned by 7 p.m. on election night. And my job over the past 7 years has been to ensure that those legal protections are upheld under what's been an onslaught of legal challenges they have faced. As those of you in this room know, Georgia has been the epicenter of election litigation in the country over the past 7 years. And we knew going into 2020 that 2020 would be no different. We were one of the main targets of the Democrat Party's 4 pillars litigation strategy. Some of those pillars were to allow ballot harvesting and to extend Election Day past November 3rd by accepting ballots after Election Day. In Georgia, we wanted to make sure that our laws were upheld, including our law banning ballot harvesting and our law requiring all ballots to be received by the elections office no later than 7 p.m. on November 3rd. We felt strongly about this. Not only was extending Election Day past November 3rd, in my opinion, a twisting of the Constitution to try to benefit a preferred candidate, but in Georgia, we're one of 2 states that have general election runoffs. So our election officials have to immediately get started getting ready for runoffs, and as the chairman alluded to earlier, they're busy doing that right now for, of course, some very high-profile Senate runoffs and a PSC runoff on January 5th. Early voting for those runoffs starts December 14th. So, they're busy getting ready for that while they're also completing their recount of the presidential election. Fortunately, from the litigation standpoint, we were able to accomplish all of those goals. Our ballot harvesting statute was challenged, but it was upheld, and a district court judge did initially extend the period to receive absentee ballots past Election Day, but her order was stayed by the 11th Circuit. In that 11th Circuit opinion staying Judge Ross's order that extended the time period to accept absentee ballots, one of the things that the 11th Circuit mentioned was the drop boxes that our state election board allowed. And I know there's been some questions about that. The drop boxes, I have with me here, but the 11th Circuit said that cited the drop boxes as one reason why we didn't need to extend Election Day past we didn't need to receive the receipt. We didn't need to extend the ballot receipt deadline past Election Day. So I think that turned out to be a good thing. I have with me here, I don't know if all of y'all can see it, but I'll hold it up. Our drop boxes are, of course, required to be under 24/7 video surveillance. And each of them have to post a notice that says, notice this location is under video surveillance. Only the following individuals may possess or deliver an absentee ballot: the voter, him or herself, the voters enlist approved family members, mother, father, grandparent, et cetera. An individual residing in the same household or a caretaker of a voter with disabilities. And it also cites warning, unauthorized possession of an absentee ballot violates Georgia law and is punishable up to a fine of $10,000 or a term of imprisonment up to 10 years or both. And cites that willfully destroying, defacing, or delaying delivery of any ballot violates Georgia law. This is the notice that's posted on each secure drop box. You may have seen some of them in your counties. Obviously, video surveillance and this notice are higher levels of security than what's required around your usual USPS drop box. And so, we think that the drop box has worked well. Regarding signature verification on absentee ballots and absentee ballot applications. First, elections in Georgia are run by local communities in each of our 159 counties. Within those communities, elections are overseen by a bipartisan board of elections and registrations, or in the 30-something counties where elections are run by the probate judge, the voter registration and absentee ballot signature verification function are overseen by a bipartisan board of registrars. And there's a reason that elections in each county are run by a bipartisan board. It's to ensure that each political party has a voice and direct supervision and access into every part of the process. These bipartisan boards have hire and fire authority in their counties. They can appoint absentee ballot clerks, and they oversee procedures to ensure that state law and regulations are being followed, including verification of signatures on absentee ballots and absentee ballot applications. We received quite a bit of questions before the election, before the November election, and also currently about whether or not the signature verification process is public. The answer to that is yes. Our Georgia code states that election officials must perform their duties in public. And what we told people before the election was, it's public. Now that doesn't mean, it means you can be in the room. It doesn't mean you get to look over someone's shoulder, and it doesn't mean you get a vote necessarily. But the bipartisan board of elections, they have direct access to everything, including the Republican members and the Democrat members. And they do get a vote. And it's, in fact, they're the people who are charged with verifying that. So it's both public for public observation, and it's open to each political party through direct intervention and oversight through their representatives on each county board of elections or registration. One question that we have received a lot is about a signature match settlement agreement that we entered into in February or March of this year. That we entered into a settlement agreement. The Democratic Party, DNC, and I think DSCC had challenged our signature match law, asserting that it was unconstitutional. So, we really wanted to make sure that check was upheld. So we were able to settle the case, and one of our main goals in settling that case was to ensure that Election Day was not extended. We saw this in post-election in 2018 when federal judges, right after the election, ordered counties to go back and do things or allow additional time for things, and we wanted to make sure that didn't happen. Because we think it's a twisting of our law, and because it's not something that counties really have time to do in terms of good election administration. So we were able to settle that case by doing one thing we had already planned to do, which was define the timeline when a county had to get out notice of a signature issue on a ballot. There's a law passed, as you guys well know, in 2019 that introduced a cure period for absentee ballots that had signature issues. That was something that had been going around the country, and for absentee ballots that didn't have a cure period, they were basically getting struck down all around the country. So we added that that cure period to make sure that our signature match laws were upheld. The state election board passed a rule that said you have to get out the notice of a signature issue to the voter within 3 days, or if it's within 11 days of election day, within the next day, because we wanted to ensure that the voters had time to do that. And we wanted to ensure that judges didn't say at the end of the day, oh, there's not enough time. We need to extend this cure period time past the Friday after election day. So we did that, and the other thing that we agreed to do in that settlement agreement was put out an official election bulletin, which that's something that our office sends to counties. It's not a law, it's not a regulation passed by the state election board. It's basically us talking to counties and saying, hey, here's something we think you need to know. Here's our recommendation on how to best follow Georgia law. The first sentence of that official election bulletin said, counties, and I left it downstairs, I apologize, but it said counties are required to verify signatures on absentee ballot applications and absentee ballots on both the signature in eNet, which is our voter registration system, and the signature on the absentee ballot application. And if the signature doesn't match, you follow the process set out in OCGA 21-2-386. And we actually knew pretty well how counties were doing this because of all the litigation in 2018. And what we put in play, or what we recommended to them, was actually the process that many of your counties already followed in terms of doing signature matches. So that's why we agreed to that. In return for that, we got a release of all signature match claims for the rest of 2020, which I think helped to accomplish our goal of not extending election day past November 3rd. One other question we've been getting a lot is I don't know if it's a question, as maybe it's more of a request, is to perform a signature audit of signatures on absentee ballots and then applications and signatures on file. Our office investigates elections issues when we receive a specific complaint of fraud or irregularity in the process. We have over 250 investigations ongoing right now. Many of those are about absentee ballots. And many of those will include a signature match of or kind of a signature audit of the voter's absentee ballot application and their vote on file. One thing that we have seen come up quite a bit is allegations from individual voters that when they went to vote, they were told, you have requested an absentee ballot, and the voter said, no, I haven't. So that's something we've been looking into, and the voter is kind of understandably concerned, oh, this is fraud, someone's doing this for me. What we have seen in every one that we have been able to look into so far is the voter was on what we call the rollover list. In Georgia, there's a law that if you are over 65, or if you are disabled, or if you are a military or overseas voter, you can make one request for an absentee ballot and then receive an absentee ballot for the rest of the election cycle. And that's limited to those voters. You have to check the box saying, yes, I'm one of these groups and I would like to receive an absentee ballot for the rest of the cycle with no additional requests. So I think every one of those voters we've looked into was on the rollover list. So the voter was correct that they didn't request an absentee ballot for that specific election, but they had requested one earlier this cycle, and then they checked the box to say, yes, I'm over 65, and I would like to receive one for the rest of the cycle. So we open our investigations based off of specific allegations of fraud or irregularity. These, our investigators, we have 23 investigators. They're all post-certified law enforcement officers. They're armed. They carry handcuffs. They have that authority. So these are law enforcement investigations. And so we want to make sure when we're opening them that we're doing it based off of allegations that are actually investigatable and not, feelings of I don't like the result of this election. If there are any, of course, and we appreciate the chairman's accepting of affidavits, and we certainly appreciate you sharing those with us if there's anything to investigate from that side, and we of course will. We're investigating out-of-state voters with absentee ballots, and that's a difficult thing to investigate because there's many people who live out of state who are completely legitimate Georgia voters. Some of the data we've received about this person moved and no longer lives in Georgia, well, they have APO addresses, which are military addresses. So, they don't lose their residency in Georgia. Other examples of that would be college students. They don't necessarily lose their residency in Georgia either when they go out of state for college. So it really requires kind of an individualized investigation into each allegation, and that's what our investigators are doing. Before I turn it over or open it up for questions, I do want to talk about some of the things that we've seen this year from an election standpoint, and what we think we can do, or what we think we should be looking at going forward to further strengthen Georgia's election procedures. One thing we have to keep in mind that I think we've learned the past couple election cycles in Georgia is we have close elections. And over the past few election cycles, we've had people from both sides of the aisle who are really spreading things that decrease trust in the system in the results of our elections. And it seems to, that's basically been a bipartisan thing. It was generally from the left after 2018, and now it's from the right after 2020. But from my perspective, sitting in the same place on both of those, it's kind of eerie how similar the claims are. It's a lot of the same fact patterns that one side would call suppression and the other side calls fraud. And that's what we're seeing. What we do is, of course, we investigate each of those and see what the facts are. So I think our main job going forward is we've got to build trust in our elections. I think we've done a lot of things that are helpful for that. We now have a paper ballot system. So we went in after we did the presidential election. For the first time ever, we were able to go back and do a hand tally of all the paper ballots, and that's using the paper ballot, the text on the ballot, not scanned by a scanner, people looking at what's on the ballot. The result of that audit, as you guys know, showed that the result of the presidential election was confirmed, and the original count was very accurate. I forget the exact difference, but it was a very small difference. They're doing a recount right now, rescanning all the ballots, all the paper ballots, and we'll see the results of that should be available shortly. Well, from what we have heard, we don't expect any large changes in that. We do expect to see some minor changes in the exact numbers, but nothing that will change the result. So we've done that, and the audit and the paper ballots I think can really help. One thing that happened this year that of course no one was expecting was, as we all sit here wearing our masks, is COVID. And I think COVID led to a massive increase in absentee ballots. But we got some I don't want to say complaints, but more observations from election officials that they were being asked to really run 3 systems at one time with the massive increase in absentee ballots. And that's not something that's sustainable. In Georgia, we've had no excuse absentee voting since 2005. But up until this year, the preference of Georgians really seemed to be to vote in person, either on election day or in our 3 weeks of early in-person voting. In 2018, I think less than 5% of people chose to vote absentee by mail, even though we still had no excuse absentee voting then. This year it went up to, I think in the general election, about 25% of ballots, 1.3 million ballots were cast absentee by mail. And I think what we found working with election officials in each county, it's a lot to ask of them to process all those absentee ballots while doing 3 weeks of early voting, and then while getting ready for Election Day. So I think that's something we need to think about going forward. One other thing that I would say is it seems like it used to be, even though before this year, even though we had no excuse absentee voting, the people that were voting absentee by mail really were people that needed to for some reason. Either they were actually absent, they're disabled, they had some reason to vote absentee. This year, of course, that's going to go up because of COVID and people just wanting to stay home. But I think another reason it went up is campaigns and third-party groups who are really kind of treating absentee by mail as sort of a first bite at the apple, not as, hey, this is a resource you can use if you need it, but as a first bite at the apple to try to get everyone to do that. And then if they can't do that, get everyone to vote early and then do that. And that doesn't really work very well. That creates a lot of work for county election officials. We had over 350,000 absentee ballots that were canceled, which means somebody sent in an application, it was reviewed by the county, the signature was verified, the absentee ballot package was mailed out, and the voter decided they wanted to vote in person, which is fine. We have a process for that. But then, when they show up in person, they've got to either surrender their blank absentee ballot, or the poll worker has to check with the elections office, has his absentee ballot been received? And if not, cancel the absentee ballot to make sure it can't be received later. And so it creates a lot of work for people that probably didn't even want an absentee ballot in the first place. So we are seeing some of these third-party groups who, it's of course their right to try to engage the electorate, but I think there's also a responsibility to do it in a more responsible fashion, and we're not seeing that. Secretary Raffensperger has already said that he does not believe signature match is the best way to verify absentee ballot applications or ballots. And we're looking at what other states do to see if there's a better way to do that utilizing technology. We've seen one example of that in our online absentee ballot portal that the state election board authorized us to make. And we've seen similar results with that, kind of like with online voter registration a few years ago, where what we do with that is the voter has to, if the voter's first name, last name, date of birth, and driver's license number matches what's on file, they can request an absentee ballot through that portal. It really helps. It's easy for the voter. We think it's more secure because it has that driver's license check, and it makes sure there's no data entry or other types of issues at the county level. So there's going to the address that the voter confirms. So that's an example, I think, of a better way to verify these, and we'll be looking at what other states do with that as well. One other thing that we've seen, with the huge increase in absentee ballots is allegations of people who are no longer residents here voting here, and I mentioned that earlier. We're investigating that. This is kind of unfortunately out of our hands, or even out of y'all's hands, but there's federal law that restricts what we can do on that front. The way it works right now, based on a law passed in 1993, when we identify that someone has moved, we move them to inactive. They remain on the rolls for 2 general election cycles. That's a long time in this, and it feels like a lot has changed since 1993 in terms of how quickly things happen, how quickly we can get in touch with people, but that law basically still remains the same. So I don't think that's for me, probably. But so I think that's something we always want to look at, what we can do to improve list maintenance. We've done that, I think, through joining the ERIC process, and we'll see how once we get up and running on that next year, that will really help. And the other thing I think we need to look at is the state intervention into consistently failing election boards. Similar to, there's a process where the state can intervene in consistently failing school boards. We have a few counties that seem to always be coming in front of the state election board and we've seen it with the audit and the recount, where we kind of know what counties are going to have issues. And, as I mentioned earlier, they're run by bipartisan boards who have hire and fire authority. We don't have that. The Secretary of State's office, the election board doesn't have that. I think it's a good thing that that elections are run locally, but I do think there should be a process where the state can intervene in consistently failing counties. And I will wrap it up, and I'm happy to take any questions. I don't think I introduced Chris Harvey. Next to me is our elections director, and Gabriel Sterling is the voting system implementation manager. So we might kind of divide up the questions as to who might best know the answer.
Okay, thank you. That was very informative, and I want to say that I really do appreciate the Secretary of State's office being accessible to us as legislators. I know that every time that I've reached out, I've gotten prompt responses from you guys, and I have not heard of any legislator who has expressed any complaint about access to the Secretary of State's office. You guys have been very forthright with us, and we appreciate that. I think it goes a long ways towards developing this confidence in the election process that's vital to our democracy. Is that the conclusion of the Secretary of State's presentation? I mean, you guys didn't intend to present, just going to answer questions, okay?
Yes, sir.
Let me. I trust that there's some questions that committee members may have, and if you will press your button on your microphone, to the best of my ability, I'll try to recognize you in order. But I did want to take just a quick break here to recognize additional senators who have joined us. Caucus Chairman John Kennedy has joined us. Kay Kirkpatrick texted me and said she was watching online. Senator Matt Brass was at the door. I think he is now watching online. Senator Larry Walker, our Vice Chairman, has joined us. So we appreciate that. You guys, anyone else, any other senators that are participating, I'd like to hear from you. We'll recognize you. And I think it's also be appropriate, I wouldn't want to leave out our committee members. I'll just run through that list real quick. All of the committee members are here. Vice Chairman Marty Harbin, our Secretary Elena Parent, Senator Greg Dolezal, Senator Jen Jordan, Senator Sheikh Rahman, Senator Valencia C., our Pro Tem, Senator Butch Miller, Senator Randy Robertson, Senator Tyler Harper, and Senator Steve Gooch, our whip, is also in attendance. I appreciate you guys being here and being willing to help us accomplish our goals here. I see a message that Blake Tillery is also joining us from his office. I'm not seeing any questions on the screen here. The buttons are not, okay. Well, a button lit up earlier, so I know somebody's button lit up, but I'll just raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I think I saw Senator Robertson first. It looks like we'll go down the list. Let me defer to the pro tem first then. Which mic are you on, 14? 2 or 14? Try that and see.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you convening this committee today. Earlier, you mentioned the 24/7 video surveillance of the drop boxes. What has been your experience in retrieving the video surveillance, and has it been consistent throughout the process?
Yes, sir. Good question. One of the things that's in the state election board regulation is the video surveillance has to be kept for 30 days after certification or till the conclusion of an election contest, which there are numerous election contests going on right now. And that it has to be given to Secretary of State investigators upon request. When we just renewed that law, we added or to the public at basically the least prohibitive cost possible. It's always been a public record, and public has made open records requests and have received it. We have requested it as well. For certain investigations, we received a complaint in Cobb County regarding suspicious activity around a Dropbox. We requested the surveillance. We're able to get it very quickly and review that time period at that specific Dropbox, and found that there was not anything kind of untoward that happened. And then what we have, so anytime we've requested it from a county, we have received that. I know Fulton County had some issues at the very beginning, having everything up and running back in the primary, but those seem to have been resolved. What I have told people who make public requests, if you make a request and you're not receiving it, let us know, because that's something that we want to make sure they're publicly available. And a few people have taken us up on that, and then we've requested that tape directly from the counties, and I believe we're in the process of getting some of that. One thing that people want to know is, did people close the drop boxes on time? There's been a lot of requests for that, 7 p.m. on election night and later to make sure they close them on time. We told the counties beforehand, you got to make sure you close these on time, because in this day and age, as we all know, everyone's going to have their phones out. In addition to the video, they're going to have their phones out watching it, so you better make sure. And the indication that we have is that they did. We've requested some video surveillance from certain counties to confirm that, but we have not seen any instances of that, of keeping them open too late at this point.
So to summarize your answer, which was very thorough, by the way, everywhere you requested the video surveillance, you received it, and the drop boxes were closed on time in each and every instance.
Correct. We just requested a few more yesterday, which I don't think we've received yet, but I believe we will based on our past practice.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, by the way, I also am aware that Senator Billy Hickman is online watching as well.
Yes, sir. I was about to make that announcement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, kind of stick with our some sort of protocol here. I think I recognize Senator Gooch on microphone number 3, our whip.
Thank you. Commissioner Germany, thank you for being here. I think I'll make a statement first. And I have a lot of questions. I don't think I'll be able to get to them. In fairness to all the other committee members, I think we want to get everybody's questions in. But
We're
my
happy to
questions will
follow up,
probably be
later,
similar to
Senator.
theirs. But, I live in a very conservative Republican dense area in North Georgia. I represent about 200,000 constituents in North Georgia: Forsyth, Dawson, Lumpkin, White, Union, Fannin, Gilmer, and Pickens. I sit around the table at numerous places and have breakfast with bus drivers and contractors, construction workers, school teachers, common, everyday citizens of Georgia. And then I also go to Republican Party meetings and so forth. So I'm going to try to build this statement based on a consensus of what I'm hearing. From the people that I represent, we have totally lost confidence in our system, in our election system this year. Maybe that's not a fair statement, and I'm not directing that to you
That's
or
how they
to
feel.
the secretary.
That's how they feel.
That's how they feel. And I think we all have a duty as elected officials that represent them. I'm their voice, and I'm here today on behalf of those citizens. I have a duty to let you know that this issue isn't going to go away unless we make some changes. And I've already heard you go through a list of about 12 things that you or Secretary Raffensperger has indicated he feels or you feel needs to be looked at or adjusted or modified. And I'm wondering why we haven't already done that. And maybe you've asked for those changes in the past. I don't know, and we're not going to be able to go back and change the past. But we've got to establish trust in our system immediately. We have an election coming up on January the 5th. And so one of my questions is, what can we do to reassure the citizens of Georgia that this next election is going to be a fair election? Not that the other one wasn't, but a lot of people feel that it's not fair and that there was fraud. And you've already indicated there's multiple cases of fraud being investigated. How do we know there's not more? How do we know there's not widespread fraud out there? Have you initiated any kind of forensic audits on the machines? I've heard a lot of comments about the Dominion machines. What kind of external or internal forensic auditing can be done or should be done? Should we bring in the GBI? Should we bring in a third-party computer scientist to look at the software programming of these machines? I'm hearing a lot of things out there, and I don't know, honestly, I can't tell you what's true and what's not true about it. I'm very concerned about what I'm seeing in Georgia. I've never seen this before. I'm 53 years old, but I've never seen the kind of mistrust that we seem to have at this time in my district. So signature verifications. Why do we have them? How did we get here? I understand you said there was a consent agreement that you agreed with the Democrat Party as part of that lawsuit. Was the Republican Party contacted on behalf of that agreement before you signed it? I'd like to hear more about that if we had time. The ballot harvesting, you say it's against the law, but I'm hearing all kinds of rumors that ballot harvesting does happen, not only in Georgia, but across our country. What do we do to stop it? How do we investigate it? And what do we do going forward to make sure it doesn't happen?
We do have a few investigations open into ballot harvesting, and if you have anything that we should be investigating, please let us know. If your constituent says something, please pass it on, because a rumor doesn't help. But what we can do that I think will help build trust is, okay, I'm hearing this. Tell us what it is. We can investigate it, and then see if there's something to it or not. The ballot harvesting investigations that we are having right now, there seemed to be some confusion in a couple South Georgia counties where candidates themselves were actually going around doing ballot harvesting, and that's subject to investigation right now. I'm glad you asked about an audit of the machines. That's something that we've already done. We had a independent voting system testing lab come in after the election and audit a cross-section of our machines. I think we've released those results to you guys, but I'm happy to recirculate them. And what they found was, no, the machines were working exactly properly. The software on the machines is exactly what's supposed to be on there. There's a thing called a hash value where we know the expected hash value. If someone gets in and changes something, then the hash value is not going to match. And you can't, if you're going to have any kind of code or something like that, then or any kind of virus, the hash value is going to change. So they go in, they check the hash value, make sure that it's what we expect, and it was in every instance. The other thing that I would say on the machines is the machines, as you guys know, scan ballots through a QR code that represents the voter selections. There was a lot of allegations before the election. Oh, how do we know this is going to be accurate? So what we did, when we did 100% manual tally in our audit of those ballots, that manual tally is based not off the QR code, but off of the text on the ballot of the candidate's name. I mean, that proves that what was scanned matches what was printed on those ballots.
Can I ask a couple, just yes or no? And I will do that. The voting machines, when you go in and you punch on the touch screens that I'm going to vote for a president candidate A or B, do any of those machines have any connectivity to the internet?
No.
Do they have a USB connectivity?
They have USB connectivity in the sense that that's how the machines are loaded, but then that's sealed prior to, like, when they're in use. So you can't, no one has access to it.
So do those machines get used to tabulate the votes, or is it just through the scanner?
The touch screens are just used to print a piece of paper.
Okay.
That's it.
And then when you take the ballot over to the scanner and you scan it, can it spit the ballot back out and then you put it back in again? Or does it go in and it drop in? Because I'm speaking
sir.
from, okay. So my personal experience is that once it goes in, it drops down. It doesn't come back out.
Correct.
I've been told there's cases where the ballots have been rejected multiple times and they go back in, come back out and go back in, and that some of those machines could be programmed to count those multiple times.
So, there's been allegations of that in Michigan, I think I just saw, or maybe it was Arizona, one of these other states. So one thing that I think was good about Secretary Raffensperger ordering the audit of the presidential election, the fact that that hand count of each ballot almost exactly matched the machine count proves that didn't happen.
Thank you.
If you're going to scan the same ballot multiple times, you're not going to get the same count when you do a hand count.
Okay, these are good questions, and we've got like 2 hours left. I'll get to it. I think we're going to have some folks that are not going to be able to be here today, so we've got a little bit more time, but I don't want to take it too much of your time because I know you all got work to do as well. But I wanted to go down to our minority party members. I think I saw some hands down there when I asked for questions. Let's see, which year on number 7? Let me get you lit up here. Senator Parent, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for I know that all of you have been putting in really long days for a long time. So thank you so much. And also, I'm sorry that you personally and other elections workers have come under verbal and other attacks, which obviously none of us think are appropriate in any.
If you will, pull your microphone closer.
okay.
I'm afraid if I keep turning it up, we'll get a lot of feedback.
Can you hear me?
That's better.
None of us think that that's appropriate in any sense. So thank you for all your hard work. So you said that you have about 230 investigations open? Or some are closed?
Yeah, a little more than that, yes, ma'am.
Have any resulted in issues that would suggest any widespread fraud in the presidential election?
What we are seeing so far is what I would kind of call the normal amount of, I don't think fraud's the right word. I like to think about it more of kind of legal votes or illegal votes.
Sure.
We have about 300 instances of alleged double voting, people that voted absentee and on election day. So we're looking at that. That's significantly down from what happened in the primary based on some protections we put in place. We have about 70 instances of potential felon voting. So that's what we're looking at. But no, we have not seen anything that would suggest widespread fraud or widespread problems with the voting system.
No evidence that the machines switched votes?
Correct.
No evidence that the wrong winner was declared
Correct.
of the presidential election in Georgia? Isn't there already a procedure for the Secretary of State's office to intervene through your investigators and the State Elections Board in a county that is not managing an election properly, or via a court case? Aren't there two methods by which that can be accomplished?
So there is, the way it works now is if there's an allegation that a county has not done something properly, we open an investigation, that goes in front of the State Election Board. The State Election Board will, if they concur that it's been a violation, refer to the AG's office. And that usually results in a fine to the election board or a consent order where we put in place things to try to fix it. There's not a mechanism basically for state intervention to say, you know what, you guys keep on failing, so something more needs to change rather than just dealing with specific specific kind of case-by-case interventions.
So there is a method by which changes could be forced and questions could be raised in procedures, but you cannot currently take over an entire county's system.
I don't know if I would agree with the way you put the first thing, but
There is a procedure for you to address problems that you have identified in a particular county's management of their elections currently. And if the state elections board agreed with you, then that could happen?
It goes through the state election board, and it's really a kind of post hoc, individualized, here's what needs to be done to fix that one issue.
Thank you. Would you agree that there was a significant decrease in issues reported with Fulton County for the November election versus the June election?
Yes.
One last thing. Is it not the case? I understand your characterization of the left questioning elections after 2018 and the right after 2020. But I want to just raise something and ask you and push back a little bit, because is it not the case that there were lawsuits filed that federal judges agreed with that were showing that eligible voters were unable to cast ballots after 2018, and indeed we changed the law to reflect that right here in 2019? And that here there have not been successful court challenges or evidence raised in the same fashion. Would you agree with me?
No. I would say that in not one single one of those cases after 2018 was a single eligible voter shown not to have been able to vote. You're correct that some federal judges entered some relief. There was a bunch of court cases brought this year. Some federal judges entered some relief. Then it was stayed by the 11th Circuit. Well,
that was different though, because that was like a sort of pre-voting lawsuit that you described earlier, right?
Well,
what I'm
we've
saying
had a lot of
is there was relief granted by federal judges after 2018's election. And we don't need to debate it. I just wanted to lay out there that
I will
do
say,
believe
from my
there's a
perspective,
difference.
in the same place, it is eerie how similar it feels, the allegations made after 2018 and the allegations that are being made now.
Okay. Now, I wanted to address one thing that the whip raised. I recall arguing quite strongly in whatever year it was, 2019, I think, that we should purchase a less expensive, more secure system in line with what the computer science experts and others were telling us. And that was not agreed with. So it's very interesting sitting here now, all these attacks on Dominion. And as you've already stated, there is no evidence that votes were switched, and we were able to look at the readable text. So I'm not at all arguing that there's an issue there with the way this election was conducted. But I want to tell the whip, I still believe we could have gotten a less expensive, more secure system. And to the extent that anyone wants to discuss that in the majority party, I would be happy to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Get that microphone off. Before we drift to, no, I'm picking on you.
That's fair.
I'll point out that Senator Parent has been very helpful to me in this process and trying to get witnesses here, and I appreciate your help. Let me also mention 3 more senators that I'm aware of joining us. Senator-elect Russ Goodman is joining us. Senator-elect Sheila McNeil, and Senator Brandon Beach was in the room just a moment ago. So we welcome them as well. And let me also, before I forget again, outside on the table with where you can get the affidavits is a list of some other places that you can file reports of election irregularities or observations or what have you. So that is available, and if members of the committee want a copy of this, we'll be sure to get you one, but just wanted to make that announcement. I think the next hand that I saw was Senator Robertson. On microphone 2. You're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Germany, thank you for coming down. I know you guys have been really busy. I appreciate how responsive your office has been. Mr. Teasley is always standing ready. When I called him on his cell phone, once he realized that the people using his cell phone number were actually friends after a while. And I appreciate the effort Mr. Sterling's put out as a PIO for 8 years. I understand the heat that comes from a lot of these situations. But you made a comment when you first started discussing the 2018 election because of the absolute chaos that occurred there, that y'all knew that 2020 would be no exception. So
I would not say that there was absolute chaos in 2018.
well, and
There was a lot of people making claims.
right.
But in terms of the election process,
Right.
I would say that it was very orderly and regular.
And I'm thinking inside the silo, it always seems that way. Out amongst the individuals that vote, the constituents that we represent, it's a little more chaotic than that. And I think even today we can say that. As much control as I think your office has shown, the Secretary of State's office has shown, what you guys are getting into the office are a lot of times filtered from what we're experiencing out there. And I think the whip pointed that out perfectly when he talked about going out and having breakfast and coffee with constituents in certain parts, and the information that they receive and where they receive it from really doesn't matter, but it causes a lot of chaos and a lot of concern. So, but to get to my question is, knowing that there were issues in 2016 and coming into 2020, what did y'all take? What actions did you take? Was there a crisis management plan put together? Because I've sat on a State Board of Elections call, and I've a member of the board, I believe it was, or it may have been a member of your office, rattled off a dissertation of claims and false claims that were out into the community. And of course, he discounted each one with what I believe to be facts that you guys have gathered that these things did not occur, which is very encouraging. But the problem, once again, is the audience that you're reaching with that information is very limited. So my concern is, did y'all put a crisis communication plan together between the two elections? And if so, where did it tear? Where did it break? Where our constituents are getting 3 and 4th and 5th hand information, even from us in some situations. And is there a plan to strengthen that between now and the runoffs?
That's a great question. So I would say, you mentioned the 2018 election. One of the big weaknesses that we found was people were saying stuff that was not true.
That's right.
And then we had a hard time basically breaking through. Now, of course, one big difference in 2018 and 2020 is in 2018, the mainstream media took these claims and ran with them. In 2020, they're not, but the right-wing media is. And that's where, some of your constituents obviously get their information. What we've seen in both of them, to me, is they're both equally wrong. In 2018, these guys were wrong. In 2020, these guys are wrong. We did have, I think, you guys have probably seen Secretary Raffensperger's face on TV. We had a plan for trying to get out accurate information, try to get trusted information. We're going to keep doing that. That's part of our updates to you guys. That's part of our twice daily press conferences to the press. And so I think what's really difficult is when, it happened in 2018 and it's happening now. If people don't want to listen to you, it doesn't matter what you're saying.
Well, and I agree with you. The problem is, talking to the mainstream media, you're not communicating with the public. And talking to me in another part, you're not You're not talking to the constituents. Like I said, every time Mr. Sterling's got up and gave a presser, whether I understood everything he was saying, I agreed with everything he was saying, but he did an incredible job. So I think it's probably beholden on the Secretary of State's office. Y'all need to build a communication platform, a plan to go directly to, because when a constituent asked me about Dominion, which I supported and I still support today and think it was the absolute best equipment out there for this election and for future elections, that when they call me and ask me about it, I refer them to the SOS page so they can read the RFP. And what I would love to do is when they ask for the questions about all of these conspiracies, y'all have answered a lot of them. Like I said, in the State Board of Elections meeting, a lot of them were answered. Put that information out through in a professional, cohesive way so that the almost 1,000 emails I was getting daily at the beginning of this, my AA, who has been threatened and everything else, can direct people to the experts and get the information directly. And that way, we get rid of a lot of this garbage, this kudzu that's out there that we're all getting wrapped up in. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Let me give you a little bit of an update where we are. Senator Robertson, I'm actually going to recognize you here in just a second. So as I said, we've been working for about 4 weeks on getting people from various counties here to testify today. And as the meeting notice stated, we reached out to DeKalb County, to Fulton County, to the Secretary of State's office. After that, Senator Robertson suggested bringing in Muskogee County. He reached out to them, and we had hoped to have them here, but I understand there's been a problem this morning, and they will not be able to attend. So can you just share with us sort of what's going on there very briefly?
Yeah, they finished up with the recount yesterday, and I think she got an email from the SOS saying that they had to get certification done by the end of business today. And so Nancy Boren was going to be in Muskogee County and in Columbus doing that. And my whole purpose for inviting Ms. Boren here is that consistently she has been recognized as one of the absolute cream of the crop registrars dealing with a city of approximately 200,000 people that can get fairly chaotic during elections, and Ms. Boren has just been the absolute example of how elections are managed. And so my reason for reaching out to the chairman, and I appreciate him agreeing with me, was to have a standard shown so that we could see those that are failing to reach that standard a little clearer when they talked about how they ran elections. And I do apologize, but as professional as she is, she follows advice and she follows the rules and regulations. And I just appreciate her agreeing to start with, but I completely understand why she wasn't able to be here.
Thank you.
Nancy Boren is undoubtedly one of the best election directors in our state.
Yeah, and I thought for that reason it would be good to hear from her. But so here's where we stand. Fulton County, I'm having a little bit of trouble keeping up with this, but Fulton County is here. They're going to present to us. We had 3 hours allocated for our meeting. We're approaching an hour and a half into the meeting. My plan is to continue. If you guys will give us another 17 minutes, we'll continue with some question and answer with the Secretary of State. Then we're going to bring in Fulton County. We'll go through the same process with them. Senator C., you had asked to be recognized. I want to get your questions, if you will, and then I've got a few that I think will be good for the whole that I'd like to pose. So, Senator C., you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you first and foremost for requiring masks in our meeting. I really do appreciate that, and I thank you all because it makes a world of difference when you're talking nationally how Georgia looks. But I want to take us back for a second. I was elected to the House, and I got my training, and I came to the Senate, And that's the year that Georgians elected a Democratic Senate, but a Republican governor, who was Sonny Perdue. We can't forget, we got 4 switchers that changed the voters' input at that time. The voters had elected a Democratic Senate, but we had 4 switchers to switch, and that made it Republican. Through that era, I've still been here, but one of the things I heard in your presentation or somebody mentioned about the big change, I know Clayton County, where I live and represent, is part of that change. I want everybody to know we worked hard turning out the vote in Clayton County. Terrell Starr, if you remember him, Bill Lee, strong Democrats. Clayton County is strong Democrats. But working the grassroots and working hard, turning out the vote, helped get us to where we are today. I hear fraud and innuendos and all these other things, but the real deal is work, turnout, makes a huge difference when you can wake folk up and give them a reason to understand how important the vote is to all of us. I just wanted to make sure that you all know that I really appreciate what you all are doing, because I have been part of leadership in a lot of national, because I started on the school board in Clayton County back in the 90s, where I met and built relationships. And to have those folk texting and calling me, talking about Georgia, gives me great pride, and you all play a big role in that. But all the innuendos, we didn't go through all of that when we got 4 switchers to undo what the voters had done in terms of it. Well, some of them didn't get reelected the next cycle, but we had a strong Secretary of State with Kathy Cox. I mean, we have had Democrats, and it's been a long process for me personally.
Senator, have you got a question?
But here, my question is, are we going to make sure that we don't just take it just because of the noisemakers? That's my question.
I would say we're doing the same thing that we have been doing since 2018, even before, when people have started, challenging the accuracy and the results of our elections. So we just have different people mad at us right now.
Thank you for your integrity.
Okay, I want to move as quickly as I can. I'm going to take a little bit of chair's prerogative. I think I got some questions that'll be beneficial for the public to hear your response to. So to try to move quickly, I'm going to sort of rattle these off at one time. We don't need a lengthy answer, but I think these are.
That's the second time someone said that today to me.
So talk, if you will, just talk to us once again about the signatures required for absentee ballots, how that process goes about to get an absentee ballot, and how that ballot is verified, if you will, when we receive it. And I think that what you said was there is a bipartisan election board, and those people have an opportunity to review those before the envelope is opened. And if they challenge it, it goes into a challenge pile, and there's a cure period for that. But I'd like for you to run through that real quickly. I think it's also important, sort of relative to that, for you to mention the My Voter page, how people can check the status of their absentee ballots, whether they've been received, or if perhaps someone has voted on their behalf prior to the election, if that happens. And then I've had questions about going through and validating these absentee ballots. And as I understand the process, I think I'm clear on this. Once that absentee ballot has been opened and that paper ballot is put in the stack, we don't know which, but just touch on that we can't, even if you, at this point, post-election, you go through and you say, oh, well, this person should not have voted. This was an illegal ballot. Whether or not you can reverse that or pull that ballot out of the count. And then when an absentee ballot is requested, where is it mailed? Is it mailed to the address that's on file for the voter, or could I say, oh, well, I'm off on vacation in Minnesota and I need you to mail my ballot to some other location other than the one on file? And then finally, because we all do get requests to have a lot of things investigated, talk to us just a little bit about the requirements, the staffing, what you've got available to you, how long, if you can speculate a bit on how many man hours are invested in an investigation of a single allegation, how you try to group them together to pursue. Just give us some feel about those if you can.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the signature process, the way that works in Georgia is first, someone submits an absentee ballot application, and the signature on that application has to be matched with their signature on file before they're ever sent a ballot. If it's not signed, they're not sent a ballot. If that signature doesn't match, they're sent a provisional ballot, and before it counts, they've got to come in, sign an affidavit, and show their photo ID. So that's the first step. If the signature does match on the application, the voter's mailed a ballot. And I'll jump to one of your other questions. It can be mailed to their address on file, or a temporary out-of-county address. So we did have that this year where people were, quarantining in places besides their regular address. So you can mail it to a different address out of county. You cannot mail it to a different address in the same county. So that's a restriction there. If you're going to be in your same county, you've got to be getting it at your registered address. So when the absentee ballot's mailed, it comes back. That absentee ballot envelope is signed on the back, voter's name, and it's signed on the back. If it's not signed or the signature doesn't match, then that generates a cure notice that says, hey, your signature didn't match. Here's the problem. And what we have seen from previous investigations is when the signature didn't match, it was generally the voter. And for some reason, their signature had changed over the years. It might have been a case where they got married, they had a new name, signature was different. So that's why we put in place the cure process, to uphold that signature match requirement and strengthen it. When the ballot comes back in, it's matched off of all of the signatures that are available, especially if there's a question. For most of them, there's no question. You look at it, it clearly matches. You're good. If there's a question, then you expand it and you look at everything you've got available to see what's going on here. And that could be the application, the signatures on file, other signatures they might have. So that's how that works. And then once it's matched, you're correct, Mr. Chairman, the envelope is separated and it's kept, and they're available. They're kept for 24 months. And the ballot itself is in another envelope that's not marked, and that's separated and sent to basically to get ready to be counted when that time comes. And that's because we have a constitutional right in Georgia to a secret ballot, and so they verify that it's you, and then they separate your ballot so they don't get to see who you voted for.
Talk about the My Voter page.
Yes, sir. The My Voter page, if you go to mvp.sos.ga.gov, you can look up where you're registered to vote and your precinct. You can also look up your absentee ballot status. It tells you if you've requested an absentee ballot, if the application's been accepted yet, and then when you mail your ballot back in, it tells you if your ballot's been accepted. So you can check that, whether you vote, and that's the case whether you vote by mail or early in person. You can go check and make sure, okay, yeah, here I am as having voted. The other thing that we put in place this year is a system called ballot tracks you could sign up for and say, I recommended this to my parents and my wife who voted absentee. They were getting concerned about, oh, didn't my absentee ballot count? They signed up for ballot tracks. Right when it got accepted, they got a text saying, hey, your ballot's been accepted. So you're good. So you can sign up for that process as well. And all of those things, help increase security and confidence. People can know this is what, this is how my vote has been treated. And all this is a bunch of individual votes put together. And so, to constituents that are concerned, I would say sign up for these things. Sign up for ballot tracks if you want to vote absentee. So you can make sure, that you know how your ballot's being handled.
Talk to us just briefly about the investigation and that
Yes.
burden or workload, if you will.
We have 23 investigators. Since the November election, we have opened over 250 investigations. In voting, it really does require individualized inquiries, and you see things on Twitter generally about, oh, here's what I found, and it's kind of a list without an individualized inquiry. To do a real investigation, you've got to, we talk to people, we talk to the people involved. If it's an out-of-state voter, we go to the address they say is their home address, and we see, are they associated with that address still? So those are the things that we're doing, and it is time-consuming. We do triage them to try to, get the most sort of important ones first, and we'll continue to do that. Our investigators are working as hard as they can to make sure that everything that's questionable is investigated as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Is there anything that, clearly the legislature is not in session. The appropriations process has taken place and been approved, but is there additional resources that, well, let me do it this way. And I know that we have, or I feel like we have extended that opportunity to the Secretary, but if there's things that the legislature can do to help out in the meantime, please let us know.
Thanks, sir.
So in the interest of time, I've about used up the rest of the time. Senator Dolezal had asked to be recognized, and I wanted to go to him. We are trying to move to Fulton County at 11, so try to prioritize as best you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Which microphone? You 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ryan. I'll go quickly. Do you know what hash algorithm was used on the machines? Was it MD5, SHA 256? I know it's probably out of your depth.
I believe it was SHA 256, but I'll have to get with you individually to confirm that.
Was the entire drive hashed?
I'm going to have to get
Maybe out of your
some
depth.
different people with
Fair enough. Unless the entire drive was...
I'm the lawyer.
Understood. Unless the entire drive was hashed, unless you had source code to review, what we've done so far is inconclusive.
I'm happy to send you that, and then we can take any feedback to improve those techniques
Thank
going
you.
forward.
What's the first line of review for the signature match? Who is the person or group of people who review a signature in an elections office?
Good question. So those bipartisan boards I mentioned, they have the power to appoint elections directors like Nancy Bourne in Muskogee County, and then absentee ballot clerks. So it's handled at a staff level in each county.
And what type of training do they have?
The way training works in Georgia is we train the county election directors, and then they train their staff. We did provide GBI training to every county elections director on signature matching at the end of last year.
I think I've expressed some concerns about your settlement agreement, but one thing that's in the settlement agreement that has not been mentioned anywhere that I've seen is that you agreed to allow and consider in good faith providing county registrars and absentee ballot clerks additional guidance and training materials to follow when comparing voters' signatures that will be drafted by the political party committees. And to clarify who the political party committees are, it's the Democrat Party of Georgia, the DSCC, and the DCCC.
So they did submit additional guidance for us to consider. We considered it and did not send it to counties or utilize it for training.
Thank you. Could you get us a copy of that?
Sure.
Thank you. Was there electronic software available for signature match, and was it used, were there any counties that did not use it? It's my understanding that the Fulton Republican Board of Electors did not certify the election, primarily because the electronic tools that were available for the signature match were not used.
I know Fulton County was looking at what they could do electronically. There was nothing prohibiting them from using electronic means to check signatures. I know they were trying to do some additional things where they would they wanted us to give access to bots to the voter registration system to do some of that work. And we said, no, you can't do that. But there was nothing prohibiting them from doing electronic. Do you know if they actually did electronic signature verification?
At one point, they were considering it. I honestly don't know if they executed. I think they did not.
Is what I've heard about the Republicans not voting to certify because of that in Fulton County accurate?
I've not heard that.
We know they did not vote to certify. I had heard the reasons were, some concerns about absentee ballot signatures. We're going to have investigators follow up with them to see what specifically, so we can investigate those issues.
You mentioned earlier, and I wrote it down, that it's a lot to ask of these election officials to go through the volume of absentee ballot signatures we've asked them to go through. And you mentioned that the secretary does not think that signature match is the best way to verify somebody's identity. Given those two things, and given really the massive shift toward ABM in this election in particular, it resulted in 1.3 million signatures having to be approved. Why not look at the signatures and have a third party look at the signatures to help guide us and help inform us as to whether or not your assertion is accurate, that it is a lot to ask of them, whether the secretary's assertion is accurate, that it's not the best way, and to give us the tools in our tool belt so that we know looking forward whether we got it right or whether we need to change it.
So we are looking at that from any kind of individualized specific complaint that we get. We're looking at it. I think what people are asking us to do is let's just look at all of them, all the 1.6 million, because there are some that weren't returned. Frankly, I'm not sure that's something we have the authority to do. I don't think that's appropriate because we open our investigations based off of actionable complaints, and I think when we do, as we do that, we will get information that we're happy to share about how this process worked.
To date, how many signatures have you all reviewed?
So we haven't got to that part yet. We are first we get a complaint. We look at our system to see the main complaints we're reviewing regarding signatures are I didn't vote absentee. I didn't request an absentee ballot, but when I showed up, they said I had. So what we look at is say, okay, did they actually request an absentee? Like I said, what we've seen almost every time is they were on the rollover list. They had requested one earlier in the year, and they got one for this year because they had requested it, and they were in that bucket. And then I believe we have also, then we go to the county and say, hey, give us these documents. So that's where we are to do the signature match. Give us the envelope, or give us the voter registration stuff on file so we can look at that. Actually, it wouldn't be an envelope, it'd be an application. But give us those documents so we can review them.
I'm sure some people have. I haven't suggested looking at all 1.3 million. I think it would be valuable, highly valuable, to pull a random sampling from multiple counties in this state just to know how close we got it, and to put that into the hands of people who have been trained and have experience in handwriting analysis. The last question.
The point that I would make
Sure.
on that too is, I think the point that you're probably suggesting is what we would do then if it doesn't match is follow up with the voter to see, hey, did you sign this? Because it's not really the point of did it match or not. The point is, did that voter sign it or not?
Well, the point is that they should have been sent to provisional ballot. That's the point, is that ballot should not have been accepted, and that ballot never should have been counted. The point would be is that the system failed us, and we have potentially, to your point, we don't know conclusively, even if the signature doesn't match. What we do know conclusively the signature does not match is that should have been a provisional ballot, not a ballot that was accepted. You mentioned earlier that we send ballots out of county if you move out of county. I pulled for the 3 counties who were supposed to be here today, Fulton, Muskogee, and DeKalb. We had about 20,000 ballots from those 3 counties alone sent out of state. Do you know how many ballots, absentee ballots for the entire state, were mailed to addresses outside of the state of Georgia?
No, but we can get that for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, here's where we are. As we said earlier, you know, as we've worked to put this meeting together, things have changed. Different responsibilities have kind of bubbled up, if you will. Fulton County has some representatives here. I'm not sure at this point that we actually have someone from the elections board from Fulton County here. So I'm going to, in defense of you guys, I'm looking at Mr. Teasley in the back. We're trying to get someone from the elections board at Fulton County here to understand they have work to do today. Do you guys want to go for a little bit longer, or do we want to go to the you know, it's I know we got some questions, and I would love to do that, and I think this is very fruitful. I just don't, we had told Fulton County 11 o'clock, they're struggling to get here. I think they're willing to come in a few minutes later. I just didn't want to take advantage.
We're happy to stay as long as you guys want.
Okay, well, so,
I think these guys might have to go, but I can stay, so you'll lose some of the knowledge.
okay. Well, that's what we'll do then. So I have, I've seen Senator Harper indicate a question, Senator Jordan, who else? And Senator Harbin. Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Rules Chairman, you're not a member of the committee. You'll be last, but you can ask me a question. All right, so I'm gonna go to Senator Jordan at this point. She can reconcile that with the Rules Chairman at some point down the road, how she got chosen over the Rules Chairman.
Great.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Germany, from your remarks, it seems that the use of secure drop boxes was significant for the 11th Circuit's ruling that absentee ballots postmarked by Election Day but received after Election Day could not be counted. Is that correct?
Based on my reading of it, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And with respect to that, then, in terms of drop box use, the Secretary of State, are those going to continue to be utilized through the runoff?
Yes, ma'am.
And is there any, do you have any idea if going forward they would be utilized?
Going forward, through the runoff, yes. You know, that rules, it's an emergency rule passed due to COVID. It's been extended through that time. Going forward, I think, you know, the State Election Board and the General Assembly can look at that and see, is that something that we want to continue going forward.
Okay, and then in terms of the drop boxes, it's my understanding that there was a pretty significant financial investment made in these because of the 24-hour video surveillance and all of kind of the security apparati that were put around it. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, we were able to provide some reimbursement of that through different federal money to the counties, and I think they were also able to get some other grants for that. But that's correct. There was significant resources.
And as you stand here today, is there any evidence that any absentee ballots were not submitted by a registered voter?
I don't know, one way or the other.
Okay. I want to go back to the application thing, because approximately 1 million people have now applied for an absentee ballot in the runoff. Of course, a huge segment of those are from the rollover list, correct?
About, what, 600,000 are from the rollover list. That's
Yeah.
correct.
And so really, we're talking about maybe 400,000 extra. But for
Yes, ma'am.
purposes of the public, applications are not ballots, correct?
That's correct.
And in terms of the process with respect to an application, you have a signature on the application, but there's also other identifying information with respect to the voter that is also cross-checked by each of the county election boards, correct?
Correct. First, they've got to be able to identify the voter. So, you know, the voter's name and address, date of birth are all listed, and they use that to identify, is this voter registered? That's how they find a signature to verify. And there are some applications that are rejected because this is not a registered voter. So that is the first step. That's correct.
And so with respect to the signature check that's at issue here, the signature that gets pulled up is the signature that is from the registered voter's Georgia driver's license or Georgia ID card. Is that correct?
Correct, or from their initial voter registration application.
Right, but they are the original, I mean, they are the voter's signature, correct?
Yes.
And in terms of the instances where they have not matched, isn't it true that usually it is because of some kind of disability or infirmity that has happened to the voter? For example, someone gets Parkinson's disease, and so their signature becomes shaky. Is that your understanding?
I can't speak to the why. I know in what we have seen in the past when we have gone and done investigations on signatures that clearly didn't match, the investigation showed, okay, this voter did sign this. These were both the voter signatures, even though they don't match. I can't speak to why that was the case.
And I want to get back to something you said, because I thought it was a really important point earlier with respect to Senator Dolezal, which was in terms of the signature match, it really is just what you're trying to do is to verify that this is a registered lawful voter in the state of Georgia. That's correct?
Well, you're trying to identify it's that individual registered lawful voter, not a, but like that specific one.
Right, but that's the whole intent of this.
Correct.
The intent is not just to try to throw ballots out, but because that's why you have the cure process in place, correct?
Correct.
Because even if the signatures don't match, there is a process where the county elections board then reaches out to the putative voter and says, look, we don't know if this is you or not. You're going to have to come in here. You're going to have to sign an affidavit. You're going to have to show us your identification, correct?
Correct. And we expect this year, because this is the first, real election that has been in place, that we will see a lower amount of rejected absentee ballots due to that cure process. And I think that's a good thing.
And so just to kind of close the circle a little bit on this application thing, because there's been a lot of misinformation out there that somehow these are votes that someone's collecting and sending into these various county offices. These are applications where individual voters have to provide identifying information and a signature that then is used to verify whether or not they are a lawful voter in the state of Georgia, correct?
Correct.
And at that point in time, an absentee ballot would be sent to that voter. And if that voter sends that absentee ballot back, then there is another check on the signature to make sure that that signature matches the application, but also the signature that is in the state system. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, here's where we stand. Due to official obligations outside of the Capitol, the Fulton County Elections Director is not going to be able to be here today. Ms. Jessica Corbett Dominguez, who is Director of External Affairs, is in the hallway, and she's willing to present to us. I think what we're doing right here is very important, and what I will offer to the committee, I would ask you all to committee members to get back to me and about your thoughts of having another meeting with these election directors, maybe others if you have suggestions at a later time. And I apologize it didn't work out today, but it is definitely been a moving target. So you all get back to me about that and availability on times, and if that's what the committee wants to do, we could certainly do that later. I also want to point out that Senator-elect Clint Dixon has joined us some time ago. Haven't been able to keep up with that completely, but I'm going to go to the Vice Chair, Senator Harbin, next, and then I've got Senator Harper. If there's anyone, and I hadn't forgot about our illustrious Rules Chairman sitting down here. How can you forget about him? Yeah, that's right. I won't have any more bills in front of your committee. Maybe so. So with that, I'm going to recognize Vice Chairman Harbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ryan, thank you for your answering all of our questions and the things that are there. I think the biggest thing is this, is that we look at a game, and a football game, if it's 0-44, we're not too concerned about who the winner is. In this case, we're looking at .28, and that concerns me when it's such a small margin that we're dealing with. Number one question I need to ask is that I understand in one of the precincts that represents in my district that on the day before the election, there were updates being done to the machines because of the Senate race with 24 candidates. The machine was having problems in printing that. Is that a true statement that those were being updated on the day before the election?
No. Is this Spalding County or what? Where's your?
I'm going to get to Spalding, but
Okay.
this was in Fayette County. I understood that there were people coming in with USB drives to update machines the day before the election.
We did update the machines to handle how that Senate race appeared. It was based on something that was found when counties did logic and accuracy testing. So in Georgia, we have a really robust logic and accuracy testing to make sure before the election the machines work like they're supposed to. They found something that was, Dominion said it's kind of a 1 in a million thing that they found it. So our election directors, the fact that they found it, I think is just to their credit. We were able to put in a fix for that to make sure it didn't happen. It was not the day before the election. It was a couple weeks at least, or maybe. I can get you the exact date, but no,
Okay.
Nothing would have been changed the night before the election.
One of our precincts has things working on. I understand the day before they were there working on, so that was a concern. I know that in the audit process, we found votes that were on chips. And when we start getting down to, like I said, photo finishes, we don't have instant replay. There were, in the first audit, we found votes that were still left on chips. Am I correct?
On memory cards, yes, sir,
Memory
that's
cards
correct.
that were not handled, so that issue comes into play. And in Spalding County, if you would, I know that there has been the request for the resignation of the supervisor there. Could you expand upon what y'all found in Spalding County? Because that's a concern to me, because the machines were down on election day, things of that nature that I got a lot of calls on. And even this, one county matters because of the narrowness of what's going on.
So the first point you made is exactly right. We have narrow margins here. And so that's why everything we're looking at to bring to you guys, in the next month is based off of that. And when you have narrow margins, the media would ask us right after the election, are you seeing the evidence of widespread fraud? Are you seeing the evidence of widespread fraud? And our response was, we don't have a widespread margin. So that's not really our, that's not the goalpost. We have to look at every single thing because that's how everyone on both sides has confidence in the results. This year was more difficult because of the huge increase in absentee ballots, as Senator Dolezal brought up. That's what changed this year, the massive increase in the number of absentee ballots. Spalding County in particular, I guess I'll start, and it might be, if I don't get it right, you guys can jump in. What happened there was kind of an improper loading of the poll pads. So that's what's used to check in when you go vote. Not the voting machines. This is that verifies who the voter is. And they weren't creating the cards correctly. It should be caught during LNA testing. For some reason it wasn't. She had said they were updating the night before. We've went back and checked. It's not true. They shouldn't have been doing that, and they weren't. So I'm not really sure why she said that. But there's a very easy fix to that, which is you go straight to the machine, and there's another way to pull up the ballot through putting in an activation code. They did not do that kind of seamlessly. We had to remind them about that. Once we did, I think they got everything back up and running. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. So they were short of emergency ballots, so that kind of slowed things down for them when that happened.
Okay. Understanding one county could make this election and flip it either way, and that's why my concern is that we need to know what happened there and that those votes, the right votes, were counted. My last part is this: is that military votes that went to P.O. boxes, addresses that were out of state, is there an audit process for that we can confirm that military votes were counted and accounted for, and also that those that went to P.O. boxes, as I understand it, are not eligible if they go to a P.O. box or a mail center? Am I correct on that, sir?
So you can't have a PO box or a mail center as your resident registered address. That's what you can't have because you don't live there. You can have a ballot mailed to there if that's your mailing address. That happens a lot in our rural counties where they get mail at a PO box. But you cannot have a PO box as your registered address, and that's something that we look at and are continuing to look at. What makes it a little difficult now is there are places where you can get an address that's a mail center that, it doesn't say PO box. It says, it looks like a regular address.
Okay.
But that is something we're looking at.
And last thing is, I understand that when the first audit was done, we had 52 counties who had no change, that stayed the same across the board. There was no change at all.
Do y'all remember?
That's on the scale, looking statistically, we're exactly spot on without any changes.
Is that statistically probable when we have that issue in other areas? Just curious.
Just for the record, identify yourself when you,
Sorry, what?
for the record, give us.
I'm
your name.
Gabriel Sterling.
I don't think anybody doesn't know you at this point.
I'm with the Secretary of State's office. I'm the Voting System Implementation Manager for Georgia. When we did the forensic hand audit, the hand tabulation, normally, we had a university study from Rice University that says a normal hand tabulation should be 1% to 2% off as a question of scale on average. However, all those studies historically have been done on hand-marked paper ballots. And as we know, that's where variability can come in terms of adjudication. So that's one of the main big parts about that. The 52 counties tended to be smaller counties, so you had less likelihood of having those variabilities come into place. And they generally were ones that had wider margins. So we didn't see that much change. Now, overall, in the entire state, we saw 0.1053% off in the overall number of ballots and 0.0099% off in the margin, which essentially shows that the system worked. Now, as Mr. Jeremy pointed out, 25% of the ballots were hand-marked and 75% were on BMDs, which goes back to the rationale as to why the Secretary prefers BMDs. There is zero ambiguity as to what the voter's intent is. And most of the variability we do see was when they were doing the stacking, they were doing stacks of 10 and alternate them. And human beings being human beings, sometimes there were 9, sometimes there were 11. They balanced out sometimes, and sometimes the last one there might have been 2 or 3 off. So that's where those changes came from. And again, these were done, many were live streamed. They had monitors there. We were happier the closer we were to having no differences. But statistically, it's not impossible. We just have really good elections directors who are very tired at this point. But I think that goes to the answer there. The fact that we had variability shows it's a hand recount involving people doing the best they can.
Right, thank you. I just think that the biggest thing I see is this. We've got to give people the truth for them to have trust in our system, and that's why it's important. But thank you.
And this office has done everything it can to be transparent and truthful throughout the process.
Thank you.
Okay, we need to move along as quickly as possible, but I'm going to recognize Senator Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first off, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say thank you for calling the hearing today, and to our Senate caucus and our Senate leadership for their participation in making this happen. It's good to be with all of you today. I think it's imperative and important. I know I want to echo a lot of what some of my colleagues have said. You know, we have heard from a lot of our constituents, and I think that's why we're here. And I appreciate all of you being here today just to answer questions so we can have this open dialogue, because I think it's important to have a transparent process where we're able to ask the questions that we're being asked on a consistent basis, and we can ask it in a way where everyone can hear the answers to those questions, and hopefully in some cases, in some of the things you've alluded to, we can rectify some of the issues that may be false that are out there, and that those concerns that may not be false, we can get answers to address and see what we can do as a legislative body to address those going forward. So I want to start off by saying this. I think I can speak for everyone here today, and I think the Pro Tem alluded to this, we do condemn the personal attacks on each of you. I don't support those. I think those are uncalled for, and anything we can do to support you in those efforts, we want you to know that we have your back, because we don't think that those are appropriate, regardless of who you are and regardless of what office you hold. But we know that there's a lot of there's a lot of excitement right now in this process, and I think all of you know that. But that said, just some things that I've been asked from some of my constituents, and I think just kind of reiterating some of the things that have already been asked. The Pro Tem referred to the ballot drop boxes. On the video footage that we have that is required in regards to the drop boxes, you said that is reviewed. How often is that reviewed? Do we review all of that footage? Is there a process to do that, or is that something you're continually working through?
We review it upon request.
Okay.
If we get a complaint or if there's an issue, then we ask for it. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, how, remember in each county, there's a bipartisan board of elections. They can choose to review that as often as they want. And when signature matching, they can choose to be as involved in that as they want, and we encourage that.
Okay. On the ballot drop boxes, is there a verifiable chain of custody from the time that box is picked up, taken to the warehouse or wherever it is taken to until that ballot box is open to be counted?
Yes. So the regulation requires that at least 2 people who are sworn deputy registrars pick up those ballots, count them, put them in a sealed container, fill out a chain of custody form, deliver it to the county elections office. At that point, they confirm the number of ballots, and then fill out the chain of custody form that it's been delivered.
So at that time,
And seal. The ballot container has to be sealed
okay.
also.
So at that time that is done, we know how many ballots are in that drop box when it is taken to that place. So there is a count of those number of ballots at that particular time.
Correct.
Okay. So regardless of how long it may take us to count ballots, we know how many ballots we may or may not be counting in the next couple of hours during that time period. Is that?
So for drop boxes, yes, that's correct. And you're talking about for when they close them up at
Yes.
7 p.m. on election night,
Yep.
because they're emptying them every day and bringing them in. On election night, yep, they'll have that count, and then there's also ones that come in, to the office by that time, 7 p.m. just through the mail process. There would not be a count on those, but but they would be counted as well.
Understood. Thank you. I agree with Senator Dolezal in regards to the signature match audit and verification issues and a lot of what he discussed in that regard. And I know you've already answered those questions, but I think you hit on a really good point in the fact that making sure the person that sent in that absentee ballot is actually the person that signed that absentee ballot. Is there a process? Do you have a process, or are we working on a process where we can audit that particular provision? Other than auditing the actual signature itself, I think it would be just as important to audit the signature verification to make sure that person actually did sign that ballot. Is that something we do? Are we looking at doing, or is that something we need to work on going forward?
I'm not sure I follow. Is that
So-
separate from the signature verification?
Yes, it would be separate from the signature verification. You mentioned earlier in your response to Senator Dolezal in regards to signature verification, the best way to verify signatures is to verify that the person that sent in that absentee ballot is actually the person that signed said absentee ballot.
Yes.
Is there a way that we audit that to make sure that that is taking place maybe in a sample audit of some sort or a random audit?
The way we do that right now in Georgia law is through the signature verification. I think what we're looking at and what we will bring to you guys shortly is what we think are possible better ways to do that going forward.
Okay, so you're looking to bring us some suggested changes on how we can tighten that up. And I know the Secretary has stated he would like to see some sort of ID provision in regards to absentee ballots, and I would support that.
Senator, if you will wrap it up.
Okay.
Maybe one more.
Well, I'll get to some of the meat of some of the questions that I have then really quick. I had a list of them, Mr. Chairman, but I'll
One more question, but I'm sure the
I'll,
Secretary of State will receive your questions.
Well, if I could get a couple I have a couple that I think I need to,
You-
I'll do it really fast.
You're eating into Senator Gooch's too.
I'll do it really fast. Senator Parent referenced a couple of rulings from 2018. Do we know what president appointed those judges that made those rulings?
Yes, sir. For all the rulings that went against us in pre-2018, they were appointed by President Obama.
So there were President Obama appointed judges that issued rulings that went against the state of Georgia. Is that correct? Okay,
Correct.
I just wanted to put that out there. In regards to the consent agreement that was made in March, was the Georgia GOP involved in that process?
We've been fortunate to have some of the best election lawyers in the country representing us. And our lawyer in that process is also the general counsel for the state Republican Party.
So the lawyer that works for the GOP was involved, just not necessarily the GOP in general?
Correct.
Okay. And just in regards to the consent agreement, why did the Secretary of State or your office feel that you had the authority to sign that agreement when, in fact, the U.S. Constitution and the Georgia Constitution leaves authority to make changes in regards to state law? That is left up to the General Assembly to determine. What led you to believe you had the authority to make that agreement with the Democratic Party?
So we don't believe that changed law at all.
Okay.
The first thing in that agreement is you have to verify signatures, and if you don't, you follow the law. That's what it says. And I spend a lot of my time defending the laws you guys pass, a lot of it. And I take it very seriously. So I disagree with the sort of premise of your
Understood.
question.
I understand.
I got the,
Okay.
out of respect to the witnesses waiting outside, we've got to move on. Senator Gooch,
Okay.
I'm going to go to you on microphone 3.
Thank you.
Please make it quickly.
I will try to do much better. A quarter of the votes cast on November 3rd or leading up to November 3rd were signature verified ballots, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we've just elected the most powerful position in the world leader, the President of the United States. If I go to vote, which I always do, I vote in person almost every time, I have to show a photo ID, which is usually my Georgia driver's license, has a photo ID. I hand it to the person that's working there. A fourth of these ballots that were just cast weren't verified by anyone except the person at the registrar's office without very little training, little to no professional training. We just elected the most powerful person in the world. If I go buy land in my hometown, I have to have a notary public to notarize my signature. Any other business documents that you sign, most of the time have to be notarized or witnessed. How can we certify this election this week, knowing that a fourth of the ballots haven't been verified by professionals or even audited? You said earlier, I believe, to Senator Dolezal, none of your people have done any checks on those signature verifications. How do we certify this election this week?
So I agree with your, I think, overall point that photo ID is a good way to verify people. There was a lot of fear about it when we went to photo ID for in-person voting. I think what we found is it doesn't restrict access. It doesn't it doesn't decrease turnout. It's just a good way of checking, and it helps increase confidence in the process. In 2005, when we moved to photo ID, this body on a party line vote went to no excuse absentee voting that did not require ID. So that's our law. So that's how we certify it, because it followed the law.
All right, thank you. I anticipated hearing from Secretary of State's office for 45 minutes. I think you've been in the hot seat now for 2 hours, and I really do think this is beneficial. I think you've heard questions from the committee that are that reflect the sentiment of the people, and I hope that you would agree that this has been a good forum to kind of explain some of the misunderstandings that are out in across the state and frankly across the country. So I do thank you for your time here, and again, you all know that you have access to the Secretary of State's office. If there's further questions, we want to get there. I hope that the people of Georgia, the people of this country has had an opportunity to hear what you all have said. I think it's been very, very beneficial, and I thank you for being here. With that, I'm going to dismiss you. Thank you again for your time, and I believe that Miss Jessica Corbett Dominguez is in the hallway. If she hears me, maybe she can present here at the
And I would
first
say,
door.
if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to our office, and we will get answers.
And I'll be glad to funnel those questions to the Secretary as well, if that's beneficial to you. Will you just step out and be sure, see if you can find her?